Are you ready for the truth? Bring it on!
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Do you want the whole truth?
I don't think you're ready.
Governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people.
It's Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
Welcome back, Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, the fastest 90 in television talk, radio, web, name it. We are here. We will have an exclusive interview regarding the story that Chris Woodward opened up with in his newscast tonight about the benefits, death benefits with veterans tomorrow night with a Gold Star mother. So we will have that for you. Great reporting, as always, from Chris Woodward, Chad Groening, Charlie Butts, and the gang. And you can check out news on the hour, onenewsnow.com. Of course, it is American Family News. That's why you lock it in. AFR Talk. Nothing but truth. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Our friend Ryan Mauro. He is the National Security Analyst for the Clarion Project, clarionproject.org. What if you found out that the man, or excuse me, an advisor, a senior advisor to the Secretary of Homeland Security, was supportive of Islamists? What have you found that? Pretty big news, right? Well, yesterday, Daily Caller. Yeah, tell me about it, Ryan, because yesterday, Daily Caller highlighted your work, of course, which is outstanding, and you gave a broke down the information for us in the interview that you did by bringing us the main points that came out. And a lot of times there's 1, 2, or 3. No, there are numerous. You can go, and we're up to 15 points, and they're all big headline items. Ryan, explain.
Right, you can go to clarionproject.org to see the summary right now. Basically, I interviewed a senior advisor at the Department of Homeland Security. His name is Mohammed El-Abiyari, and he's been the subject of criticism and allegations of having Muslim Brotherhood ties before. But in this interview and the accompanying research report that I released, there are 15 takeaways that you can read about at clarionproject.org that are just, each one is just too amazing to believe that we have a man at a senior position at the Department of Homeland Security. And so, for example, some of them is the fact that he's supportive of the Muslim Brotherhood. He says very kind things about them, compares the Muslim Brotherhood to Christian evangelicals, says that the U.S. should ally with the Muslim Brotherhood, and he's also a longtime friend of Shukri Abu Baker, who was a Muslim Brotherhood operative in the United States that is now in prison for financing Hamas. And, of course, El-Abiyari, the man at the DHS, says that trial was just political persecution. And that was the country's largest terrorism financing trial.
And so we have this man in that position. What is our policy going to be with this kind of advice, Ryan?
Well, it's going to be pro-Muslim Brotherhood. He sat on the working group on countering violent extremism that the Department of Homeland Security put together. And it's clear that he's one of the main authors behind it because the language of what he used in his interview with me is identical to what came out in DHS training guidelines. And those training guidelines basically leave an entire generation of counterterrorism personnel ignorant about the fact that the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood even exists. And they are not supposed to be taught about their nonviolent tactics. If you look at the training guidelines that he helped author, or that he's very likely to have helped author, it says that you can't learn, or that law enforcement personnel should not learn about Islamists using democratic freedoms in order to advance Sharia law, or things like litigation jihad, or any of the other nonviolent tactics that we all know that the Muslim Brotherhood uses. And also, you're not allowed to learn about the fact that mainstream Muslim organizations have ties to terrorist groups and the Muslim Brotherhood. So some of the most important counterterrorism information, particularly about the Muslim Brotherhood, is being scrapped from the training curriculum due to a Muslim Brotherhood supporter.
What has been the response from the government to your story, Ryan?
So far, there hasn't been any, and because the media is so focused on the shutdown and they just focus on one scandal at a time, this isn't getting much coverage beyond the Daily Caller, and it's very, very disappointing to see because it's not every day that you have a senior Department of Homeland Security official coming out for the Muslim Brotherhood.
Imagine if you, in fighting a war, you have a coup on your hands in the sense that you're writing the rules of engagement for your enemy. That's pretty sweet.
Oh,
pretty
yeah,
awful.
It's amazing. He also says that Saeed Qutb, who is the Muslim Brotherhood theologian that inspired bin Laden and most Islamists around the world, he says that Americans should read it without jealousy or malice in their hearts. Apparently we can learn a lot from the Muslim Brotherhood's theologian that inspired a generation of terrorism.
I would think this would be a great question to ask even the president today. We were doing something last hour. What question would you ask the president given an opportunity today? Of course, you'd probably have to steal a Huffington Post badge, but then they call on you, and then they'd be really surprised. But this is something that should make certainly make the daily press conference with Jay Carney being asked about this type of, asked about this. This is outrageous, Ryan. I mean, were you shocked when you were putting this together in this interview to understand exactly the totality of this? Because I sit back and I'm still going 15 points already, and we're still going.
Right, that's exactly the point, is that I was shocked because normally these individuals that have links to Muslim Brotherhood and have these links, they either don't like to talk about them, but this guy likes attention, so he was happy to talk to me. You should see what he writes on Twitter all the time, and he's actively promoting the interview I did with him because he thinks that somehow it vindicates him. And he says that he wants to make the conservatives in the Republican Party understand, because he himself is a Republican. He wants conservatives to understand that the U.S. needs to engage Islamists. This guy was also a delegate for John McCain in 2008. So this is truly a bipartisan problem, and I was shocked by how honest he was, and even when he was leaving certain things out, there is still stuff that he has said on public record that I was able to insert into the report so that you can get a full reading on who this individual is.
I get the idea the only way to really confront people about the seriousness of this is to look at the, reveal part of the butcher's bill of the organization, what it's been tied to, and then also speak to Muslims like Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, I think, would love to have a discussion with this guy too. And the reason I say that is to just highlight how outrageous this is, because otherwise people, I mean, as you said, we talked about this yesterday. Chris Christie, John McCain, others, there have been people turning a blind eye. I say this with respect for their record, so to speak, specifically John McCain and his heroic service to this country, and thank you. But they turn a blind eye to the enemy and to the evils of the enemy, and personal relationships are superseding the danger and the behavior of organizations that are enemies of the United States. And we also saw that, tell me if we saw that with Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner's wife. Did we see that as well?
Yeah, it's always, and this has really been one of the most disappointing things I've noticed, not just in the government, but also in the media. So much is based on who you know. I mean, it's really true that it's all about who you know and not what you know. That's how D.C. works. It's how the media works. And you talked about Zuhdi Jasser, who's an anti-Islamist Muslim, and he's a hero. Well, Mohammed El-Biari, the Homeland Security official that I interviewed, basically bashed him in our interview and said that anti-Islamist Muslims are counterproductive. So he's even going against Muslims that take a stand against the Muslim Brotherhood. That's how much he's going to bat for these organizations. And by the way, the mentor, Shukri Abu Baker, the guy that has mentored this Homeland Security advisor since he was 16 years old, the guy who's now in jail for financing Hamas, there are FBI wiretaps of him saying in secret to participants in a Muslim Brotherhood meeting, look, use deception, that theme over and over again. So the mentor to a top Homeland Security official, or an advisor, I should say, has been recorded saying to use deception on the unbelievers.
And that is a part of what I believe is referred to taqiyya, element of Islam that is practiced by people who deceive. It makes it all right to lie to the non-believer. My question to you on a general, just stepping back, there is a huge problem in our educational system with institutions of Middle Eastern studies that have people that are sympathetic, and I'm being gentle, to our enemies' plight or our enemies' grievances or our enemies' point of view and goal. So this is, I mean, yeah, they're in the White House, okay, in essence. They're doing that. But we have a huge problem here, don't we, overall?
Right, because it's not just about influencing policy and politics, which obviously they're doing a fantastic job of if you look at our foreign policy towards the Muslim Brotherhood nowadays, but it's also reaching out to churches, reaching out to synagogues, reaching out to schools. The Alavi Foundation, which is an Iranian regime front, that Iranian freedom fighters openly call part of the Iranian regime's propaganda apparatus, spent a lot of money, millions of dollars, giving donations to universities and different organizations. And when the Iranian regime doesn't have much money to spare, but they say a good investment where we get a lot of returns is the universities and these different nonprofit organizations to pursue our policy objectives, that's very telling because they don't have money that they can just throw around and waste.
I now have to shift to Cynthia McKinney for a moment, and I'm only going to play one clip, and it's the one in order, everybody. So the first one I have there. And this is the former Georgia Congresswoman on Syrian television being asked about the Syrian war and, well, post 9/11, how they were making progress in the UN through the UN Conference on Racism, which is a blame, hate Israel fest. But this is what she had to say. Roll it.
And at that conference, people from all over the world gathered, and they talked about their grievances about the way the world is currently structured. And a part of that discussion was about Zionism, if you will recall. Yes. I was there. I was there as a member of Congress. I represented the United States. So it's not quite accurate to say that the United States wasn't there. The United States was there. Members of Congress chose to go. Certain members of Congress went. I was among them. And then, literally days later, September 11th, 2001 happened. The tragedies that struck the United States. Changed the politics, changed the international scenario that was unfolding. And the world has been in turmoil ever since.
Well, I've got to play the next one because I want to complete this. So you get that. That's the foundation of what she's saying. Hey, 9/11 changed everything. We were making strides. And then she says, well, does this have something to do with the war in Syria? Does this have something to do with what we're seeing take place now, post 9/11? Roll it.
Well, I think we need to step back and take a look at what we know now as opposed to what we knew back then. And what we know now is that, at least from General Wesley Clark, who also ran for president, he unveiled a policy, what he called a policy coup that had taken place inside the United States. And the crux of the coup was that the United States was going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. So it's not just Syria.
Yes.
It's Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Libya. 7 countries
exactly.
in 5 years. And that, I believe, is what we see unfolding.
Yes.
Now you say, Cynthia McKinney, didn't she get in a tussle with a Capitol Hill guard? Doesn't she say some things that are wacky? And yes, that is true. But my question to you, Ryan, is when we hear that somehow we've caused the terrorism against us, somehow Israel is not our number one ally or an ally in the region, they're the problem, we need to stay out of that region. My question to you is, when we look at the far right's isolationist view and the anti-war left's view of foreign policy, is it premised on the idea of conspiracy specifically being anti-Israel?
Well, definitely there is an upgraded version of the Protocols of Elders of Zion anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Back then it was that the Jews controlled the banks, Jews controlled the governments, and they're trying to conquer the world and enslave humanity. That has now changed to where they say it's the Zionists. It's essentially the same thing. And so it's an upgraded, modernized conspiracy theory that's very popular in the Muslim world. It's distributed by anti-American propaganda outlets. And based on my knowledge of Cynthia McKinney and the things that she has said in the past, I'm not making this accusation, but I would say I would not be surprised at all if we found out that she was colluding with or receiving financing or some type of assistance from foreign propaganda outlets. I really would not be surprised because she is always saying things like this, and anyone that voted for her needs to get their head checked because the things that she says it's like it's straight out of Al Jazeera.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. By the way, I wanted to say elements of the isolationists, right, and elements of the anti-war movement. I didn't mean to malign the entire group there, but it concerns me because I think there is a breakdown of understanding that United States, for all our flaws, and the West in general, we're the good guys. And there is evil in the world, and it's not all Muslims, not that way, but when we look at regimes like Iran, when we look at Bashar Assad's regime, they could be secular, they could be theocracies. Bottom line, they are looking for an excuse to justify their actions. And when we look at those actions, we look at, they're not looking at saying, hey, we're defending people. No, they're expanding an empire. That's what they truly want to do. Is that off the mark?
No, that's accurate. And as for her comment about what Wesley Clark said in regards to there being some secret plan to invade and bomb all of these countries, those are all countries that for years and years under different administrations, we all knew were sponsoring terrorism. So yes, after 9/11, we looked at the different countries that were terrorist safe havens and said, how can we eliminate them? That makes common sense. That's not a conspiracy unless you're inclined to believe a conspiracy. So she views everything through that prism.
Ryan Mauro, appreciate it. Appreciate your time. You know, I'll be calling for more interviews probably this week and even tomorrow. That's always a warning to you. Just appreciate your work. Let's let me post this article up that you sent me. Would that be all right on the Facebook? The summary?
Yeah, please do. I encourage everyone to read it and make sure you have tissues nearby because you might cry.
Amen. Thank you. Ryan Mauro, ClarionProject.org, National Security Advisor. There are times that you have to look and say, okay, this comes out of nowhere, McKinney and the comments she's making. I think there is something seriously wrong overall with somebody's history when they don't view what we have done on the side of good. You say, in every case, no, we're human. And unlike the left, I don't believe we can have our human nature perfected in that sense other than through Jesus, and that will happen as always after we pass this earthly realm. Bottom line, when we look at a worldview, we have to look at where it comes from. What is it assuming? What is it taking into account? When I look at President Obama's worldview, he looks at us as imperialists. I think it's bizarre. Empire builders even, I've heard that. When we are the greatest liberating force in the history of mankind. And as a nation, what I'm speaking to specifically, and I'm speaking specifically to our soldiers, our Marines, and our airmen. And I think to myself, when those people put their lives on the line, there is this idea of America, though not perfect, no, we are the good guys. And what produced that? What made that happen? Was it a view that there was no God? Was it the view that the state knew better than the people? Or was it a Judeo-Christian foundation recognizing that there's a God? Not only that there's a God, but that we are fallen and that we have natural rights. And understanding that freedom is not granted by the state, but it is God-given. The idea that we are all created equal under God and under equality of the law. And we do possess these certain inalienable rights. The point I'm making is, as we're talking about all of these things, I want to go right at the foundation of leftism. I can do it economically. I can do it with foreign policy. We can do it constitutionally and understand it. But if somebody doesn't possess the worldview of looking in America as our founders understood it to be, and the nature of man as our founders understood it to be, and recognizing we needed a religious, I believe, society, it talks about upholding those words in the Constitution, what is outlined in our Declaration. If we don't have a society that understands that and upholds it by their behavior, what do we have? Well, no, we just have pieces of paper that can be manipulated, and that's exactly what has happened. When I look at President Obama, I don't believe that he is sitting there going, you know what, I believe in freedom. No, I believe he believes in the state. Now, he believes, as many leftists do, that that is the very best thing for America. And that doesn't mean America grows and prospers. No. It means America's taken down a notch. And while you speak to the idea of, well, Crane, you're going to his mother, I'm going to the worldview. This was known in 2008 through the record, through what his influences were, how he would move and use power, what he believed in what he laid out economically, what he understood about the state's job to redistribute the wealth. So I speak to you, and maybe you don't agree with what I have to say. Maybe you're on the left. Maybe you're on the right. I don't know. I'm pretty far to the right. But if you're on the right and you disagree with me. But if you're on the left and you say, you know, Crane, you conservatives, you Christians, you're all about hate and different. You got it all wrong, see? What we believe in is freedom. And the freedom to express our ideas and to talk about things and reveal what the truth is through that discussion. And we believe there is absolute truth, that is not always malleable. No, there is absolute truth, objective truth. And while we point those things out and we talk about Scripture, by pointing those things out, it doesn't mean we hate. It means we actually love, because we're pointing out that there is a foundation, there is a bedrock to what we all believe and base our lives on, in the sense of an understanding, at least when we're speaking to what I believe in. And that all said, live with honor in your life, compassion in your heart, and always keep the faith in Jesus Christ. We'll see you next time.